On today's episode, we have our guest, David Goa, and we're going to be talking about how the COVID pandemic has made people rethink their lives. Many people have become less materialistic. Many people have quit their jobs. And many people realize there's more to life than buying the new smartphone every year or buying a new car every couple of years. Many people have really put a lot of thoughts into their lives and become more aware of their own mortality. So how do we really understand how much COVID has really changed the world? And from a spiritual perspective, how do we really understand things? David Goal?
Well, your suggestion here is interesting. I wonder if it's an enduring matter or if we're just in the wake of it. So some of these changes are there. But let's imagine that, let's follow your thought and let's assume that these are as significant as they might appear to be. One of the things about the pandemic was that it did isolate people a lot.
Oh, yes.
Just an awful lot. This was very vivid, particularly with people in care. They became extremely isolated, and we've seen the costs of some of that within our society. I think for others, it completely upended the normal rhythms of life. It meant that your routines, which you may have taken for granted for a long time, were no longer routine. You couldn't do them. You couldn't participate in them. It certainly impeded people's social interaction in a, I think, quite dramatic way. So anytime something dramatic like that happens, and I suppose the last dramatic thing that happened, which in any way could be, one could see similar kinds of effects, would probably have been the war. You know, when there's a general social shift that occurs, and Karl Barth, the great Protestant historian, always talked about, or Protestant theologian, always talked about crisis theology. Mm-hmm. That in fact, when a crisis occurs, there's an opening. When a crisis occurs, one is almost forced to reconsider how you've understood things. So I think you're correct for many, many people that this was a crisis. It did mean that they started to rethink how they lived, how they shaped their life, what their real commitments were. It is telling in the job market that, as you suggested, so many people have either left jobs, not gone back to them, decided that they're not going to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. I wonder about this. I think that it's obviously a good thing to consider. Is this really the way I should be spending my life? What's the real fruit of this? The larger question involved in that is really the question of work. And what do we really think work is? Yes. And what is the purpose of work? Now, my own view is that everyone has a responsibility to as best that lies within them to make a living, to keep body and soul together, to support their families and what have you. And that that's kind of elemental. For people who are making more money than they need,
Mm-hmm.
and that includes a lot of people in this society. For people who are making more money than they need, this is an important question, because it's a fundamental question of why do we shape our world, and why do we shape our own life in a way that's acquisitive, in a way that just acquires more and more all the time. And that, of course, is associated with what we would call the temptation to greed, and to possessing much more than we need to live well. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes down. Another aspect of it that I've wondered about, and I don't know if you've thought about this at all, I think because there was some government support for people who were making hourly wages during the period, that perhaps some people have realized through that period that they actually could still be paid without actually doing much to earn it. Now, my own view is that I was happy to see our government do this. I was very happy to see our government do this. In the first stages of COVID were remarkable, where our Prime Minister, the premiers of all the province, for the first time in my lifetime, did I see them all behave as statesmen. That is, they were not playing party politics. COVID was something they did not understand. COVID was something which wasn't party pre. They couldn't fit it into their usual ideological silos. So in a way, we had a remarkable period of collective thinking about the common good. I had hoped that would continue, that we would see more of that going forward. But of course, it didn't take very long before the political ideologies got on board. One of the great spiritual implications, I think, of COVID was the degree to which it increased people's fantasies.
Cool.
The degree to which it increased their engagement in all kinds of conspiracy theories and notions which were bizarre. And it did this for a lot of people. Now, part of the reason, or part of the way this is fed, is of course through isolation. When people are isolated, I suspect many of them also spent much more time on the internet, and because they feel the crisis, they want to have some explanation. They want to have it fit into a new worldview. So it is remarkable to me how the politics of many liberal democratic societies, which was moving in a curious direction anyways, how that also became exacerbated, became much more ideologically tribal. So this is, I think, one of the dangerous sides of what has occurred here. On the positive side, as you have suggested, people reevaluating their work, people deciding they can do with less. Those are all, it's about time we started to do that, in my view. It's excellent to see people move more towards simplicity. Simplicity is a gift. It's a gift. It gives you much more time. much more ability to respond to others if you in fact take it seriously.
Well,
So
there is a concept.
It'll be interesting to see how this shakes out.
Well, there's a concept of becoming a minimalist, where some people try to limit their possessions to 100 things or a smaller number of things, the opposite of hoarding, so to speak. And they say it's supposed to liberate you to achieve the things you want to achieve. You're not constantly maintaining multiple things. You're not chasing after multiple hobbies. You don't have multiple cars to look after. You keep things simple so you can actually focus on your projects. I kind of joke, it's kind of like monasticism light. It's you live simple so you can actually achieve what you want to achieve. You can actually focus on the things you want to focus on. So whether one calls himself a minimalist, I do see a lot of people living a more simple lifestyle and they're liking it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My sense is that was beginning before COVID.
Yeah.
I've seen it in my children's generation.
Mm-hmm.
Much more attention to human relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Much concerned about flourishing friendships.
Oh, yes.
Much more than they are concerned about acquisitiveness. And that I think is a wonderful thing. You talked about monasticism light. That's kind of a lovely phrase.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we do have within the Eastern Christian tradition, we do have a strong teaching about what is usually called inner monasticism. That this is part of the Christian life in general.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the Christian life is intended to be shaped around prayer and asceticism.
Mm-hmm.
Prayer in the sense of the cultivation of your capacity to be present,
Mm-hmm.
to be attentive,
Mm-hmm.
to be compassionate and loving of others.
Mm-hmm.
And asceticism in the sense of learning, exercising those disciplines of limitation, of letting go, of not fixating on a great variety of things. And we, of course, live in the kind of consumer society that we have grown up in is bizarre in terms of the history of human culture. To be able to create all this stuff or get it on the backs of somebody is very unusual in the history of human culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes along with the fact that we don't usually create fine things. We create stuff.
Yeah.
Instead of having one fine thing which shares in beauty, we have 100 which just get in the way. So I hope that your assessment is right, and that in fact this does give birth, and that there is a kind of flourishing of a new sense that living simpler actually means living better.
Yes. A lot of people came to realize you work long hours, but is it really worth it? Like you see what's going on in China now, they have a word meaning slacker, and a lot of these younger people they'll just go in the park for 5 hours a day and go rollerblading, and they're fine with it. So when you think about it, you can be very judgmental, but then again, what's the old option? Spending 12 plus hours in an office or going to the park and hanging out with your friends. We have this one life to live. Whether you're religious or not, we have this life to live. No one's going to give you a medal. No one's going to give you a huge reward for spending excessive amounts of time at work. And the younger generation, we don't expect to get pensions, so what are we actually chasing after anymore?
The question that I would have is the 5 hours rollerblading any different? the heart of the matter that you're speaking about, I think, is important. I recall an interview that a New York Times journalist did many years ago with Thomas Merton, the very well-known monk in the Cistercian monastery in Kentucky, Gethsemane Monastery in Kentucky. And the journalist, towards the end of the interview, mentioned about how much sacrifice was involved in being a monk. And my recollection is that Merton kind of chuckled a little bit and said, "What are you talking about? Here at the Abbey of Gethsemane, we grow all of our own food. We eat very healthy and lovely. We have wine at every meal. We have 8 hours a day to study. We have 8 hours a day in which to do real good work. You think we are making sacrifices? You are wrong. We're living the full life. If you want to see somebody making sacrifices, you need to go back to New York, and you need to follow the young executive who's just recently got a position in a major corporation. Follow them around, and there you will see sacrifice. They're giving up relationship. They're giving up leisure. They're giving up all kinds of things for the sake of corporate advancement. That's sacrifice."
Yeah. And the fact when you come to realize money, our current money, is fiat, meaning debt-based currency. And if you look at, what are we actually chasing after?
Well, people lose a sense of proportion in life. But I hope you're right about the period we've come through. And I'm sure you are right for some people. It would be nice if it was for many.